Dozens of people have been killed in protests in Sudan. Citizens have been expressing their outrage at a slow move from military rule to U.S. governance. The U.S. has now appointed Lucy Tamlyn as ambassador to Khartoum. She's extensive experience in diplomacy in Africa. We have, of course, seen the military trying to retain power through a coup. Thembisa Fakude is a research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues. Thembisa, good afternoon to you. We've seen these protests in Sudan against the military government. Is this just the military trying to hold on to power for as long as possible?
Well, they've since declared that they will be fighting terrorism, which is a commonplace language in the Middle East when they mean that they will be suppressing protest. So they are trying very hard to hang on to power, but the protests are continuing in Khartoum in particular, and one wonders when this stalemate is going to end. We know that there are talks afoot at the moment in Saudi Arabia involving some of the members of the civil society organizations from the civil society engaging with the military in Saudi Arabia. So those talks hopefully will produce some sort of solution moving forward.
The military is obviously very organized. It's used to being in power through Omar al-Bashir, if I can call it that. How are civilians then in Sudan organizing themselves? It must be quite difficult to do if you're against an organized military.
Well, they're certainly not organized. I mean, the Forces for Freedom and Change in Sudan is a compilation of civil society movements or civil organizations that are trying to push out the military from power. So there is no organization. And if we are to be, as I've said before, if we are to hold elections in Sudan, whether next year or late this year, chances are whoever is backed by the military is likely to win because they are the most organized political formation, as you correctly stated, at the moment in Sudan. So it's a catch-22 for the civilians. They've got no other choice but to go with whatever suggestions are going to come now that the discussions that were initiated by the UN and the US are afoot. So most have got no choice but to join those negotiations.
The United States and Sudan, they're appointing clearly a very senior ambassador there. Do they have much influence at all in this? Does anyone have much influence in Sudan?
Well, the US has, because, of course, they've got an economic muscle, and they can use that to attract even those that are anti-negotiations into the negotiating table. What is troubling is that the current lead negotiator is Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is not very well known in the region for the promotion of democracy or promoting democracy for that matter. We also know that Saudi Arabia has a sort of arrangement with Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who is, both of them are part of the military, and they are supplying Saudi Arabia with soldiers of fortune in Yemen, which is a war, which is like a coalition that's led by Saudi Arabia. So there is that relationship between the military elite in Sudan and Saudi Arabia. And many people are saying if Saudi Arabia is heading these negotiations, we are likely to see the reversal of fortunes from the civilians after the protests.
Thembisa, you're a very diplomatic man to say that, we haven't seen much interest in democracy from Saudi Arabia. You are, of course, absolutely correct on the facts. There's also the question there, and Sudan maybe poses a bigger question, actually, of how difficult it is for countries to move from any kind of repression to democracy. I mean, we saw the North African revolutions, as they were called, 12 years ago. I think only Tunisia emerged as a democracy. Their president eventually just closed down parliament. So what we have is it shows you, demonstrates once again, that apart from the South African example, almost nowhere do you go to democracy from repression in just one move.
No, that's true. But we also have to accept that democracy in its nature is clumsy. It's disorganized. It's full of push and pull. And we see that happening at the moment in Sudan. But it's going to take a very long time because you still have to establish democratic pillars for that democracy to thrive. And Sudan doesn't have any of that. I mean, one of the biggest obstacles many are saying, given that the general Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has said that they are likely to have elections next year in August, is that there is no they don't have platforms through which they can have election, for example, or voters education for that matter. No platforms that will enable an environment that will produce free and fair elections. So it's a long way to go for the Sudanese. And as most people are arguing, the best bet they have at the moment, unfortunately, is the military, because it's the most organized. And they are likely to form a proper functioning government because of experience, etc. This loose coalition that they have now, consisting by and large of civilians, is not going to produce a proper functioning Sudan, because it's a very tough environment. And you have a lot of people who are, by the way, implicated, particularly the deputy general or the deputy chairperson or president of the Sovereign Council, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. He was involved in the Janjaweed movement, which is implicated in the massacre of Darfur. So those are the kind of people that are not going to jail, and they're not going to allow a proper democratic process. The president of the Sovereign Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, was the deputy of Omar al-Bashir for a very long time. So if you're going to be holding Hassan Omar al-Bashir for crimes against humanity over the years, you can't avoid also to call these two very important political players in Sudan by the names of Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo also to account for their actions of the past.
Thembisa, I really appreciate the time. Thank you. Thembisa Fakude is a research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues.